Welcome to the second episode of Gaming Origins, where we take a look at the origins and history of various topics in gaming. Today we're taking a look at Jak and Daxter, one of my favourite series from probably one of the most esteemed developers of all time, Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog are known for some of the biggest faces in gaming, such as Crash Bandicoot, Uncharted, and The Last of Us, with Uncharted 4 being their last big release, which was one of, if not the best game of last year. Jak and Daxter began production after Crash 3 Warped released, and during the time Crash Team Racing was being created, splitting Naughty Dog into two teams. Naughty Dog chose to create Jak and Daxter because they were adamant they wanted to release a new IP on the then newly released PS2 and wanted the game to take advantage of the new technology. Despite going down the route of platformer again, much like their previous series, their goal in mind was to create an open world environment with no breaks, which is quite the opposite from the Crash series in which you had a hub world with individual levels separate from each other. Artistically, they were inspired by anime and manga, as well as various cartoons such as Disney. Jak would receive many designs before the one we all know and love, some close to his final design, some a big departure. Everyone knows Jak and Daxter is a duo, however originally a third main character, Pet, was planned that would grow with you throughout the game. However, the idea was ditched early on. Jak and Daxter was a light-hearted game, a story where your friend Daxter is turned into an Ottsel, a hybrid between an otter and weasel, after falling in dark eco, which sets up your quest to turn him back. Despite Jak being the main character, he's completely mute, with Daxter being the one to provide all the personality and quips.
I'll say something really teary at the funeral, like, "How am I gonna get changed back now?"
The game went on to be extremely well received by critics, scoring an average of 90% on Metacritic. Roll forward to 2003 and the sequel Jak 2, or Jak 2 Renegade in PAL regions, released differing massively from its original game. GTA 3 released a year or two prior, proving to be extremely popular amongst gamers and became strangely but successfully a big inspiration for Jak 2. Aesthetically, the game made several changes, gone were the colourful islands with a more drab city setting. Along with a change in environment, Jak is a completely new look. A more mature image, a gruff personality, and for the first time a voice to match. We also see a new form, Dark Jak, that features heavily in the story from all the dark eco injected into him from when he was captured between the events of the first and second game. Taking great inspiration from GTA 3, it shows in the gameplay. Jak relies less heavily on punches and kicks and has a range of guns at hand, as well as the ability to hijack various vehicles in true GTA fashion. Personally, this is my favourite of the Jak games, however it's also the most frustrating due to the unbalanced and unforgiving difficulty level with sparse checkpoints. Jak 2 scored similarly to the first game with a Metacritic of 87%. In 2005 we saw the end of the trilogy with Jak 3. Jak 3 doesn't stray too far from its predecessor like 2 did with 1, nor did it need to. Jak 3 features a new location set in the desert with an emphasis on dune buggy vehicles which we'll use extensively throughout the game. Jak's image changes once again, although far less drastically, and is rather a style change as opposed to the physical changes of his features. Jak 3 succeeds the most in tweaking and improving the overall gameplay. Difficulty is far more forgiving, you have more gun options at your disposal along with the option to use Dark Jak and the new form, Light Jak, more freely. Jak 3 scored the lowest of the trilogies overall, however still scored an extremely respectable Metacritic of 84%. Naughty Dog's last developed game in the series was Jak X, a racing game that was surprisingly good. Naughty Dog seems to have the impeccable ability to turn any game into a functional and downright good kart racer. Jak X does contain a story and follows on 3 years after Jak 3 ended, in which the crew have been poisoned and conveniently must win the tournament to gain the antidote. The game effectively takes the dune buggies from 3 and turns them up to 11, giving you sleeker vehicles, more control, speed and a variety of different weapons. It's also worth noting this game had some pretty great music in my opinion. Daxter released on the PSP and the first game released by another developer, Ready at Dawn, who would later go on to create such games as Okami, the God of War PSP games, and most recently, The Order 1886. Daxter, as the name suggests, has you take the role of Daxter between the games 1 and 2, tying the two together. Daxter was a successful departure from the usual gameplay and for a PSP game, looked pretty great. 2009 was a bad year for Jak, and one that quite frankly, the less said the better. Jak and Daxter The Lost Frontier originally began development under Naughty Dog until the development was eventually passed off to High Impact Games. The game is a continuation of the story from the previous games in the series and one I am absolutely pretending never happened, and you should too. Jak and various other characters have redesigns that this time aren't an improvement, including the change of many voice actors for the worst. The Lost Frontier deviates too much from what made the original trilogy so great, and the newly introduced Dark Daxter sections were an unnecessary addition. The The Lost Frontier scored 71% overall, which, considering the mistakes it made in my opinion, isn't a particularly bad score. In 2012 we saw a HD remaster of the trilogy on PS3, which was well received, taking in much loved classics, remastered in widescreen HD, and showing just how well the games have actually aged. I would love an actual remake of the games, however this remaster does a great job. The same can't be said about the Vita remaster port however, which from the standpoint of getting them on a handheld is pretty impressive, however they ran pretty damn poorly and are arguably unplayable for that reason. Fans, including myself, have been clamouring for a Jak 4 or at least another Jak of some kind by Naughty Dog, and we almost got one. A Jak and Daxter reboot began development in 2011 and was eventually scrapped for what became The Last of Us, which if we're honest, if you're going to scrap a Jak and Daxter game for anything, you can't be too angry when we got the stellar The Last of Us out of it. Released was some concept art for the reboot, going down a much more realistic route and once again completely changing character designs. Honestly, I'm kinda glad this didn't release it because I don't think the series needs to go down that realistic look, nor needs a reboot. A Jak 4 in the art style we're used to, I think is all that's needed. Who knows, maybe it will happen one day in the future. That concludes the video for today. If you enjoyed it, remember to leave me a like and sub if you haven't already. Let me know which Jak and Daxter game was your favourite and if you'd have liked the Jak reboot concept. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.